Good afternoon, Dylan with Huntsville Guns. Quick update video. Did a little bit of testing today in the 300 Blackout project. For those of you who aren't aware, I'm looking for a Subsonic 300 Blackout round that is capable of expanding and departing all of its energy pretty quickly. Something that reliably expands at subsonic velocity, but also departs all of its energy inside the wound cavity of an animal. So today I have a box of Hornady Subex. This is their 300 Blackout loading. It's a 190 grain Subex projectile, and it is rated at 1,050 feet per second at the muzzle. And then I also have some G2 Research. This is their 300 Rip Out, or the Trident. This is a monolithic copper projectile, and it is a 200 grain projectile rated at 1,040 feet per second. The test rifle is a CVA Scout. It's an 18-inch barrel 300 Blackout, and it is running a Yankee Hill Phantom suppressor. Today I wanted to do some preliminary testing to see if my bullet catch was a viable option. I have a gully behind the shop. That's where I do all of my test firing at. And so my normal range is 25 yards, kind of at a downward angle into the embankment on the backside of this gully. And that gully is comprised primarily of a pretty thick black clay. So I dug out a couple of nylon sandbags full of this clay material. It's nice and damp from the rain we had last week, and stacked 2 nylon sandbags on top of each other, and then backed it up with an AR 500 plate. I think I'm gonna have to revise kind of that testing apparatus. I in this preliminary testing fired 10 shots, and I only recovered 3 projectiles, with the majority of them traveling all the way through the clay substrate and then impacting the AR 500 plate and fragmenting behind the sandbags. So I'm gonna have to either go deeper with my clay or find another medium that's a little better at catching projectiles without damaging them. Majority of what I did recover impacted that plate. So let's start with the Hornady Subex. So it's a lead core projectile with a big polymer, kind of their proprietary polymer tip on the front of it. Said this is a 190 grain projectile at 1,050 feet per second. The 5 shots that I fired of this today were all supersonic out of this 18-inch barrel rifle. So they did not stay subsonic. It is a little cool out today. It's about 35, 36 degrees, and that can affect audible sound through a sound suppressor. I didn't chronograph anything today. I didn't really feel the need to set up a chronograph for 10 shots, but also this is just more preliminary testing to make sure that my bullet catch is functioning. And so out of these 5 shots, I only recovered 2 projectiles, and I recovered both of these between the back sandbag and the AR 500 plate. Surprisingly, the 2 projectiles I recovered are missing their lead core. I wasn't able to find anything outside of that, but they did expand pretty significantly. They almost kind of a petaled, flower petal type look all the way down past the cantilever on the bullet. I suspect that they opened pretty quickly into the clay, but when they impacted that AR 500 plate, that they separated core from jacket. A little more testing is going to be needed to see just how much clay it takes to stop these. And then we are jumping to the G2 Research. So this is, like I said, a monolithic copper projectile. It's got a big hollow cavity in the front and 3 pre-cut lobes. These projectiles are 200 grain, and they're advertised at 1,040 feet per second. I can tell you that they hit with a significant amount of authority. There is a visible difference in the impact on the clay from this projectile over the Hornady. I would say that this one hits harder, if that makes sense. And then the wound cavity in the clay, the first one of these I fired, the wound cavity between the first bag and the second bag, so call it 1.5 inches or 2 inches into the clay, all the way to the steel plate, was the size of probably a 6-inch diameter. The kinetic energy it imparted in that clay was significant compared to the Subex ammo, and enough so that I had to reconfigure my clay sandbags just to be able to continue to shoot into them. I only recovered one projectile from these tests, and it was pedaled pretty significantly. So here we can see the main body of the projectile and where it impacted the AR-500 plate. But I would say it probably retained 50% of its overall weight. And then after I drop it on the floor, wherever it went, one of the lobes or petals off of the front, you can see the split section here where it was pre-cut. It definitely did what it was designed to do. It opened very quickly because I recovered this in the clay and then this after it impacted the plate. It would appear that it impacted at an angle, so it definitely wasn't traveling straight. It was on the way to keyholing. But like I said, preliminary test, the G2 research, in my opinion, from watching the impacts, the G2 research hits with more authority than the Hornady Subex. I'm curious to know, I've had some experience with Hornady bullets in the past where they do this same thing. They kind of hand grenade and just turn into a million pieces when they hit. And so I'm wondering if maybe the jacket material on this is too soft or too thin, and so that's why it exploded the way that it did. It's perfectly ethical if you're hunting with that, and it does that reliably within the first 6 inches of an animal. But if it's doing that on the way out and then just throwing fragments everywhere, you definitely want it to expand sooner, which is kind of my assumption based off of what I saw today. Like I said, just preliminary testing for where I'm headed with this project. This is a pet project, doesn't belong to a customer. It's actually for me personally. Would like the ability to humanely and ethically dispatch unwanted guests at a friend of mine's ranch. And so in testing, looking for something that reliably expands its subsonic velocities and is an ethical hunting option. If you have some suggestions for a better bullet catch or an improvement, like I said, a couple of 3.5-inch thick sandbags full of clay did not appear to stop any of these projectiles. If you have some suggestions, I'd love to hear them. Drop them in the comments down below. If you'd like to see a little of the setup or the filming of shooting, I'm more than happy to be inclined to do that as well. Again, drop it in the comments down below. Thanks for hanging out. Hope y'all have a great afternoon.